at heart like an entrepreneur. Like I don't necessarily like working for people in terms if I know that the leadership lid is too low. There was a point at which I would see things. I'm like, why are we doing it this way? Like we should be doing this. At the time I was like, I think I can, if I just took the extra 40 hours that I'm working at the store and just applied this to what I'm doing, maybe I would increase my revenue on the YouTube side. So that was the bet that I made. It was just a bet that I made on myself to say, maybe I can do this full time.
3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reactorverse podcast brought to you by Passionfruit. I'm joined today by a great Reactor creator and collaborator in the space, someone I'm a big fan of. I've been following for a little while now. It is Adonis Xavier, Super Saiyan Jutsu. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Hey man, I appreciate it, bro. Thank you so much.
Of course. It's been a while since we had our previous conversation for the Attack on Titan Crossing the Streams episode that we did. That was the first one, and thank you for joining us for that. It was a great conversation, but since then I've been wanting to get you back on to just talk about your personal experience with your channel, everything you kind of gone through with it, obviously because you have a big story to share with us, I know for sure. So I want to start all the way back in the beginning, as we do, with the start of the channel, which is the fact that you didn't start with the reactions at first. It started with tech reviews. That was kind of like your bread and butter to go along with for the beginning of the channel. What was your history with that? I guess that field of interest with tech and getting into that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've always been like a tech nerd, like since I was a kid. Started with cars and then obviously computers and stuff like that, tech and stuff when I was younger. And I was actually working at Apple at the time. I was working at Apple as a specialist there. And one of my friends, who is actually the co-founder of Ismahawk, we worked together. And he was like, I was doing stuff with them, just behind the scenes stuff, filming stuff. And they were like, he was like, man, you should think about doing a YouTube channel. And I was like, for real? And he was like, yeah, dude, like you're like one of the biggest nerds I know. He's like, you should consider it. And and at the time I had just finished dancing professionally. I decided I no longer wanted to do that. The last show I did was the Jabberwocky show in Australia. We had a residency show in Vegas, and then we went to Australia for about 6 months. And after that, I was like, I don't think I want to continue a dance career. I think it was just something that I didn't really see as a fruitful career choice financially in terms of what I wanted to do and the life I wanted to create. I just didn't see myself doing that. Even though I loved dancing, I wasn't really in love with it. So I was still kind of in between what I wanted to do. So while I was working at Apple, I'm trying to do different stuff and just figure out things. So when he told me this, I just kind of went back, kind of sat with it for a little bit, and then started writing down like a list of things that I was good at, like things that I knew that I was really either extremely skilled at least that I felt I was confident in, and trying to see if I could figure something out with it. And one of the things was I was good at public speaking. I can speak in front of thousands of people. I've done it at sales seminars, things like that. So I was solid at speaking. But then I was like, all right, what are my interests? And one of them was tech. And I was like, okay, well, I work at Apple, so I'm really familiar with Apple stuff for sure. So let me just start with that. So I was like, all right, so I started a channel called Absolutely Tech. And I kind of like trying to find a crazy, unique way of spelling it. So I was like, oh, I can do APP-solutely. And then, so I was like really overthinking this name, thinking like, okay, well, maybe it'll, hit. So, and at the beginning, dude, like I didn't really have a ton of editing skill at all. Like I had very little editing skill. I think I was utilizing an iMac that I was using to make music on, actually. I was in music production for the longest. So I had an iMac that I had, and I was like, all right, I'll just use this for now because it works. And my goal was a video a week. I was like, if I can do a video a week, I'll have 52 videos at the end of the year. That's all I was thinking of. I was just like really trying to focus on the one a week thing. I wasn't trying to do a daily content. I gotta be super consistent. I was like, just one a week. And by the end of the year, I'll have 52 videos. That's all I was thinking about.
Right.
And that's how I got into it. I was like, all right, well, I know some of these things that could potentially help people in terms of tech knowledge with like Apple products. So that's what I was doing. And that essentially got my feet wet in the tech space. And I was really liking it for a really long time.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, I started to notice that the tech side of things isn't necessarily an evergreen space.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There was something about it where it's like, I loved doing it. I love creating shots and stuff like that and filming things. And I love that side of it. But in terms of it being evergreen, nobody was going back looking at an iPhone 4 review.
True.
Like nobody was doing that. And I was like, maybe this isn't the fruitful nature that I wanted it to be in terms of like making a financial career that could last, very similar to like the music industry, where it was like, if I create something, it can still make revenue over a period of time if it's good.
Right.
Whereas tech content is very short shelf life of like popularity. And then once that product is obsolete, nobody's really going back to look at that stuff.
Makes
so
sense. Yeah.
I was just trying to figure out what that next thing was.
Right. Were you familiar with at least the YouTube space before that? Like the kind of the culture of it and like sort of the way that was formatted at that time back in like 2014, 15?
Yeah, it was a little bit. Obviously, I was consuming content on the platform. And then with Ismahawk, I was doing stuff with them early on with the Nightwing, the series stuff, just being around it. I wasn't involved in the production or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And then helping them on some BTS for some other stuff that they were doing, just shooting that. And so I was around it, but I didn't really have a ton of knowledge on how it worked.
Right.
So I was very, very green going into it.
Right. And when you started, again, it was tech review for a while, and that was kind of your bread and butter, like going into it. And eventually you started dabbling in anime reviews with Dragon Ball Super. That was sort of your first sort of foray into alternate content. What is your history with anime? And then what was the decision behind that sort of pivot for the channel?
Well, it was kind of interesting because I kind of fell into reactions by accident. So what had happened was there was a Goku versus Superman video that dropped on Screw Attack. And I think it was the second one. I'm not sure if it was the first one or the second. It was one of the two. I forgot which one it was. But I decided to do a reaction to it. And I did. And it did fairly good. I was like, oh, this is interesting. While I was at Apple, I'm really into film. So I had saw that the trailer for Star Wars The Force Awakens was dropping. And I had a insight on when this trailer was supposed to hit YouTube. So I left work and I'm flying home. If you guys ever lived in LA, you know that depending on if you leave at a particular time, it could either make or break anything in terms of schedule.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, okay, if I get out maybe like 10 minutes early, I can beat all this traffic. So I decided to do that, got out early. I'm flying home. I get home, turn on the computer, set everything up. And I click on the link for the video, and it was like, it had, I think like 30 something views on the Star Wars Force Awakens trailer. Like it just dropped.
Right.
So I hit play, did a reaction to it, did that, uploaded it. And then after I was done, I just kind of forgot about it. I was just like, all right, cool. Went to bed. I woke up the next morning and it had 100,000 views on it. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
I had never had a video do that before. So I was like, what is going on? I had no idea. And that was like the start of like, okay, there might be something here with the reaction stuff. Mm-hmm. It's not as, for me personally, I don't really look at it as a creative thing, like artistically. I think it's more of like a personality thing. I think for myself, it's more of my personality than me thinking of it from an artistic standpoint.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Just because I come from an arts background, right? So music, dance, like I don't really consider it artistic. Yeah. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I started dabbling in reviews for The Flash. I was doing reviews for The Flash, right. And I had decided, somebody had said something about doing a reaction to one of them potentially. And I was like, okay. So I started doing that, and it started doing pretty well. Mm-hmm. And then I started doing Dragon Ball Super, and I've always been a Dragon Ball fan since I was a kid. So I didn't really know if I should do it or not, but I was like, I know the series like the back of my hand. Like growing up, I was at a time when Dragon Ball Z had came to Toonami on its initial run on Toonami, and it would air a certain amount of episodes, and because it wasn't dubbed yet, it would restart. So it would get to like,
I remember that.
You get to like Snake Way, and then it would restart, or it would like do like a certain amount of episodes and restart, and then get to like Namek and then restart. And I'm just like, oh my God, like it was just annoying. But so I had seen, because of how it was airing, I had seen Dragon Ball Z like 8 or 9 times through, like since I was like in middle school. So I knew so much about the series. So I was like, all right, well, maybe I can react to it. Mm-hmm. And because I'm a real fan of the series, and that's kind of like how it started. And people liked my reactions to it. And I had got lucky, on a couple of early reactions that really hit, and it just started growing the channel like crazy.
Yeah. And when we had our discussion about Attack on Titan, you mentioned how, yes, back in, I guess, our era of growing up with anime, it wasn't, cool or popular to talk about outwardly. It was kind of like still like a really niche thing. Did you have any sort of those reservations in your head when you started doing the reactions on the channel of like, this is still something that isn't very, like talked about in the zeitgeist?
I'm trying to remember, because I know at a particular time, I still felt some kind of way, I think, on, because I would advertise stuff on my Instagram. My Instagram and my YouTubes are like completely different types of audiences. Right. And I was like, oh, well, I want to advertise this new reaction I'm putting up. And I'm like, are people going to really like this? And I was really concerned about that early on with like the Flash stuff and things like that. So I never really posted those things to my Instagram. And then I don't know what it was, but I just kind of got over it. It was like, whatever, like, okay. And it was one of those things too, where it just felt more commonplace anyways. Like anime had become more, I guess, accepted in Western society than it was when I was a kid. But I think some of those like lingering teenage experiences was just still like subconsciously sitting there, just saying, I might not want to show people that, because most people that found out that I was in anime that were either into music or dance, they were like, oh, you watch this too? And I'm like, hold on, what do you mean too? Like a lot of people that I knew were into anime, but nobody ever really talked about it. Yeah. And I was like, what? What's going on here? Like, so I just kind of assumed that, well, all right, well, maybe other people that I didn't think were into it are into it as well. And that's kind of, I just kind of let the barrier off, so to speak.
Right. Exactly. And getting into anime reactions for the channel obviously made a big impact. Your channel's now, has such a huge brand because of your anime reactions and your affiliation with it. When you started, though, were you aware of the reaction space itself, as particularly within YouTube, like the sort of people and like the sort of culture around it?
Yeah. Yes. Not necessarily with anime, but like I think one of the first reactors I saw was Tyrone Magnus. Like he was the first thing that I saw in terms of that, and he had this meteoric rise as well. And I was like, this is so crazy to see. Right. So I was definitely aware of it, but funnily enough, like I still don't watch reaction videos. Like I don't. It's weird. Like I create the content, but I don't watch reaction videos. Yeah, which is so weird to even think about, but. I usually consume like business, I consume car content like freak. I'm a car fanatic. So car content, tech content, yeah, and then movie content, like those types of things, like I consume on a regular, but I actually don't watch reaction content. I know of reactors in the space. I'm aware of what they do and the audiences they've built, but I actually don't consume it.
Yeah. It's uncommon. It's not uncommon. I definitely know a handful of, other reactors that have been at this for a long time. And it's just, keep staying on top of the stuff that you create, implies that you pay attention to that stuff, more than other things. And I think that's largely in part to like you said, the movie news, tech stuff. It's just your, interest that existed before all this that have, lasted. But then, after that though, in 2016, is when you moved from LA to Australia. And what was the story behind that move?
Yeah, man, that was wild. I had started, so when I did the Jabberwocky show and we went to Gold Coast, Australia in 2012, I had never wanted to be in Australia. That was never a bucket list trip of mine. I never was like, oh, I can't wait to go to Australia. That was never a thing. So when they asked the cast, they're like, hey, we're going to be taking a crew to Australia to run a show there for like 3 months. Who would like to go? And I was like, sure, like, let's do it. So I decided to do it. We were here for 3 months. The show got extended for another 3 months. So they were like, hey, the crew that's here, we can either send you guys back and we can just bring in the other cast to do it, or you guys can just stay, let us know what you guys want to do. And I was like, I'm staying. Like, I loved it here. Yeah. It was like landing here. Immediately the air quality was different. Like you were like, you would take a deep breath and be like, whoa, this is weird. I didn't know oxygen, tasted like this is what it felt like. And the colors, I was telling Ismahawk this, cause I'm a producer for that film company now. But when I came here, I was like, guys, like you don't understand how saturated the colors are here. The colors just look different. And they were like, you're hyping it up. And I would send them video. And I'm like, this is not graded. This is just what it looks like. Right. And like, I think the phone's boosting colors. I'm like, okay. And we'll get to that later. But so me, I'm just really, caught off guard by this. So, so being there, I was like, this is amazing. Loved it. When the run was done, I was like, man, I really want to get back here. Now, while I was out here, I had met someone here. They had ended up moving to the States to work for a company there. So we were talking and we decided to start dating. And then ultimately we were dating. I was coming back to Australia to teach dance workshops and stuff like that. Right. Because I was still dancing, but I wasn't performing professionally anymore. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, me and her decided to move back to Gold Coast because she's from the Gold Coast. So we moved back in 2016, and that's literally what was going on. I was there in the Gold Coast from 2016 to the top of 2023. Right. And yeah, I absolutely love the lifestyle in Australia. It's safe. Like the safety is crazy. Like it's one of those things until you're not in a scenario where you have to look over your shoulder and just kind of have your head on a swivel just to be observant of what could potentially be going on. And then especially if you're in a city, you know what I'm talking about. Totally. And then on top of that, there was the living situations were different. The cost of living was different. The amount of money people made here was different. And people didn't necessarily live to work. Mm-hmm. They worked to live. So like, I'll give you an example. Things shut at 5 o'clock. Yeah. Like everything. Stores, they shut at 5 o'clock. So you would leave work and be like, okay, well, the malls are shut. Everything's shut. Restaurants would still be open till like 9, but you couldn't do anything after 5 o'clock. Then on certain days you have late trade. So you would have like, all right, well, Thursdays in some cities, Thursday, Friday in other cities, things are open until 9 o'clock. So like, oh, you have a late night. Sunday, things close at 4:30. So things are closed early on Sunday. And then on Saturday and Sunday, if you work, you actually get, I think, time and a quarter on Saturday and then time and a half on a Sunday. So you get paid more to work the weekends. And then the paid annual leave is a month.
Right.
Not 2 weeks, a month. Jeez. So there was just so many things that you're just like, what? Free healthcare, which was wild. And I found that out when I had a cancer scare in 2017.
Wow.
Or 2017? Yeah, 2017. I had a cancer scare. I was working at the Apple store, and this was like a crazy situation. I was at the Apple store and I was helping a customer buy a computer, and she looks at my fingernail and she's like, have you had that looked at? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, that line on your nail, have you had that looked at? And I was like, no. She's like, that's usually signs of early melanoma. Mm-hmm. And immediately my heart fell out my ass. Like it was like this intense doom that just hit me. Yeah. And keep in mind, I've never done any drugs. I've never had alcohol ever in my life. So in my head, I'm like, there's no way. Right. So I immediately in that moment talked to the manager that was on the floor at the time. I was like, I have to leave immediately. And they were like, why? And I was like, I just found out that I might have cancer. I need to go check this right now. Luckily, there was a cancer clinic around the corner from my store. So I ended up walking to the cancer clinic and they're like, all right, yeah, we can see you now. So I go in, they check. They're like, we're going to need to run a biopsy because we don't really know what it is. We can't really tell. Right. So they actually had to cut out my nail matrix where my nail hits the skin. Mm-hmm. The procedure was strange because you couldn't feel it. You just feel people tugging at your finger. The pain afterwards was excruciating because all of your nerves end at your fingers. So
that makes sense.
You just feel your heart in your finger, and it was just boom, boom. It was super, super painful. Yeah. But so I had to wait a week for this result. Come to find out, it was inconclusive. So they're like, look, we're going to cut the rest of the nail out, the rest of the nail matrix out just to get it all out. So they did that, waited another week, came back positive. I was Gucci. But at that point, I was like, what just happened? You know, like it was like a shock to my system. So I ended up going to the front desk and the lady, she was like, all right, I forgot what the pay was. I want to say it was like $25 that I had to pay then. She was like, all right, it's going to be $25. Like, all right, well, when am I going to get the bill for everything? Mm-hmm. And don't quote me. I don't know if it was $25 or $85. But it was under $100 for sure. Yeah. And I was like, when am I gonna get the bill? She's like, what do you mean? She's like, you have your Medicare card, right? I was like, yeah. So gave her that. She's like, yep, that's it. I was like, all right, well, when am I gonna? When I get the rest of this payment that I'm gonna have to pay for this? Yeah. Like, no, that's it. And I was like, time out. What do you mean? I was like, what do you mean that's it? And that's like when it really hit me. I was like, Joe, this is different. Like it just felt different out here. And not ironically, that was the next day I actually handed in my resignation at Apple. The next day. Yeah. I was like, okay. Cause I love Apple, by the way, as a company. Working for them was fantastic. But it was at that point where I was like, I just need to go all in. Like at the time I was making enough on YouTube where I was like, maybe I can just put all this other energy into this and just really take this to the next level. Right. That was the moment for me. Yeah. But all of these things that culminated into why I loved being here was like the pay was excellent. The healthcare was great. The safety, the people, I've never been bombarded by police. I've never been DWB'd. The police stories I have here are outrageous, by the way, like outrageous. And people would, every time I tell people these stories, they're like, what? Yeah. What happened? It's the weirdest. So it's incredible. I love it.
Do you think that, transition, that sort of culture shock impacted your decision to step into YouTube full time in terms of just like the sustainability that you had now within your life?
No, I think I'm at heart like an entrepreneur. Like I don't necessarily like working for people.
Right.
In terms, if I know that the leadership lid is too low. I don't know if you're familiar. There's a book by John C. Maxwell called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. But
Right.
there's one of these laws called the law of the lid. It essentially states, like, if you're a 5 as a leader, nobody in your organization can be over a 4. Primarily because if somebody you're trying to attract into your organization is a 7, they're not going to want to follow you as a 5. Like, it doesn't work. So if you want to grow your organization skill in your level of your organization, you have to build yourself as a leader. So
Right.
So from myself, and it wasn't a knock at anybody at the store, but there was a point at which I would see things. I'm like, why are we doing it this way? Like, we should be doing this, or we should be doing this. Like, and it was just things that I couldn't grasp on how things were done or development pathways for certain people in the store. I'm like, why are they having you do this? Like,
Yeah.
this doesn't make sense on what you want to do. This seems counterproductive. So for me, it was like, I knew I didn't necessarily want to work for anybody. So that was kind of like the natural progression. It was just a feeling of necessarily like a false sense of security. Like, oh, well, I have this paycheck coming in. Maybe I need it. And at the time I didn't, right? Like at the time I was like, I think I can, if I just took the extra 40 hours that I'm working at the store and just applied this to what I'm doing, maybe I would increase my revenue on the YouTube side.
Right.
So that was the bet that I made. It was just a bet that I made on myself to say, maybe I can do this full time.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I decided to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a similar story from Greg Alba when I spoke to him here, a few months ago. He was saying how, like, when he made that similar transition from, working part-time to and balancing that with his channel to working full-time for the channel. The piece of, the quote that he gave me was, the profits versus wages. Wages make you a living, profits make you a fortune. And that was the sort of mindset he had going into
Jim
it.
Rohn.
Yeah, exactly. And so like that the sort of leap into it is such a sort of, a big push. I think like a lot of creators have at certain points. They think, we can do this, we can really, make this effort. And for you, when you made that leap, again, you started dabbling in heavier shows or heavier workload of shows, like more anime shows and so on, still doing the flash arrows and some of the tech reviews. Once you started filling out like a rotation of a schedule, do you remember the sort of like approach or strategy you had to like, making that effort to fill out the channel?
Honestly, I hadn't created any organizational thing for the channel until last October.
Really?
I honestly, like, I was just winging it.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things of like, I wasn't looking at any other channels for like, what are people doing? I wasn't competitive like that with it, which was really strange in business. I just didn't do it. I was like, no, I'm just going to do what I do. And if I like this, I'll continue doing it. If I don't, I won't. And I think learning from Ismahawk, like doing videos there, we had put tons of money and sponsorship deals into a particular video. This is going to hit, and then it doesn't. And you're like, what? And it's like, sometimes you can, what it taught me was different genres of content require different sets of skills and focuses and disciplines in how to build an audience there. Like, for instance, on that side of things, we can do one video a year, right? We could do one video a year and say, okay, let's raise capital and do a video and it gets 14 million views, right? And that isn't our main source of income. But if we want to just do something on the channel that we're proud of, right, we can do things there. But obviously the cost is much higher to produce a short film than it is to do a reaction video, right? So the amount of videos I can produce on my channel is exponentially higher than what I can do on Ismahawk, because I need a crew. I need all types of people need to get paid. Like, it's a drastic difference, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, okay, I don't think there's a cookie cutter way of doing this. But I hadn't really planned anything. I was just winging it, dude. Like, I wish I had like, here's the golden parachute of how to become a great reactor. I think personally, it was the time that I started to do it. There wasn't a ton of people doing reactions at that time in anime. So it was timing. I think it was a lot of luck. I think my personality helped at the time. But as time goes on and people see, the barrier of entry for reaction videos in terms of skill, technology, and know-how is extremely low. It's low-hanging fruit in terms of content creation. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are like, oh, I could do that. And so many people started to, right? And so as that happens, you start to see numbers drop. You start to see attention go different places. You start to see, you know what I'm saying? So things start to change. And if you're not aware of these things, like I wasn't, you're trying to figure out what's going on. Like, things used to be a lot different than they are now.
Right.
So, what had happened, 2020 hit and pandemic hit, and I was like, okay, well, I'm usually home all the time. We got locked down here. So Australia's lockdown was different.
Right.
Where I was at in Queensland, we had a whole lockdown for 30 days, which means you couldn't come and go out of the state. You had a certain amount of time you could be out of your house. You couldn't go a certain amount of distance from your house, but they locked it down for 30 days. We had like one case, like one death. It was something super low, but we were only locked down for 30 days and we were Gucci, but we still couldn't leave the state for like 2 years, but we could still do stuff within the state. No problem. Right. But for me, I was like, I do this all the time. I'm at home all day, every day. So for me, nothing changed. So I was just producing more content. And then I took like a 2-month break. I decided to cold turkey 2-month break. I was going through some just mental health stuff. I was like, I just need to take a 2-month break, just decompress for a second. I feel like I was doing too much stuff. Right. Came back after 2 months and I just had no reach, zero. Like, I would do a video and it would just kill the channel. So I would usually get like minimum 50,000 views on a video, and now it was like 200, 300, right, 1,000. And it was like, what just happened? Like, what happened? I would, on average, on big videos, get like 100,000 views, no problem. Now I'm barely breaking 10. What is going on? And then it was like this big spiral of doubting what was going on. Like, am I shadow banned? Like, I'm just going down this rabbit hole of excuses, right, of why things are going the way I wanted to. And so it was, honestly, bro, like, I think it was at that moment where I'm like, all right, I need to start to try to figure out what is going on here. And then I started looking into other channels and saying, oh, okay, well, they're doing the same thing I am. What's going on? And that's kind of what started me trying to really understand what I was doing. Because at the time, like I said, I was just doing. I wasn't really thinking about like the strategies in anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you make a good point. Like, obviously, since when you started over time, over the last, like 6 years or so, in 2020, there was such a boom in the space, particularly, like you said, because of the lockdown, everyone was at home and there were so many channels that launched because they were like, I have nothing to do. So I've seen reactions. I want to give that a try. And some of those channels like really, took off and launched and are still around and thriving. And that, like you said, just pulls, the space wider. And so it's a little harder on top of all the sort of algorithmic changes that YouTube makes, year to year. Yeah. And so when you started, looking at it analytically like that, were you, I mean, one of the things I really respect about you is your sort of efforts to improve the space, highlight, things in the space that you think can be improved upon. Like, for example, your use of backstage, as in lieu of your Patreon stuff. That's something that you've kind of introduced for yourself, and you've explained to me and other reactors as well, at the benefit you've had there. Interesting. Backstage shut down. Oh, really? Unfortunately, yeah, it shut down. There was
whatever the investment, I guess, into the company, decided that they wanted to go a different route with their funds. And so the CEO hit us up. I think it was like right before Christmas. I think it was like November. Mm-hmm. And they were like, hey, investment decided to pull their funding and blah, blah. And I was like, all right, like it's one of those things for me. Like I've never really been focused on, especially when it's something like that, like you take risks and sometimes they work, right, and sometimes they don't. And I think being caught in falling in love with like a particular result, as I think when people get into like these hard situations. So when that happened, I was like, all right, well, and I think the platform was awesome. I think it had a ton of growing that it still needed to do. But I was like, this idea is really cool. It just unfortunately couldn't sustain itself financially. But again, it was one of those things where, you take a risk sometimes, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that's life. You know what I'm saying? That's just what it is sometimes. Right. Some things don't work out the way that you want them to, but ultimately I think they work out the way that they need to. Mm-hmm. You learn a lot sometimes in those scenarios. And I think I learned a lot during that period, actually, right. And what I needed to do in terms of building more community within my channel. And that helped quite a bit, actually. And now moving into Twitch and stuff, and it's actually helped substantially in that regard. So, awesome learning experience. I wish the app was still around, but right. It happens, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to know though, because like, it's a large, trend going on with, so many companies, like so many, endeavors that people take, in this space to try and introduce something new. Like, we're really all at the behest of like, investors and stuff that can pull the plug at any right. second. It's a tough space to exist in for that. But for yourself though, getting into, like you said, this past year and so, and changes to like your dedication to the channel, you're expecting now, which congratulations on that. So I'm very happy.
Thank you so much.
I spoke to my buddy Sonny from Cat Sonny about, he had his own kid about a year and a half ago, and how much that changed, his obviously work-life balance for that. And I haven't had a chance to speak to anyone who's in the current state of expecting. I guess, once you sort of found that news out, obviously it's fantastic. But how does that sort of, impact the, overall mindset of how you approach that work-life balance?
Yeah. We intentionally tried, so, that was something that we wanted to do. So we were already gunning for that. And I think for me, it was like the best natural motivation that I could ever have. Mm-hmm. Like for myself, like there's things in my life that I enjoy, that I'm focused on. I've always kind of been trying to build a particular life for myself and get to a certain financial level. So nobody around me has to really stress about that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. I make the occasional dumb expense, or, that was a dumb decision, or you place a bet here and it doesn't work out. You're like, okay, but you learn from these experiences. Right. When we got the news that we were having a baby, we're like, okay. And it was like this immediate shift in focuses. I was like, all right, I need to figure out how to scale what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Because I live in Australia. So, and my audience was used to me working super crazy. Like, I don't think people in the States really understand what I was doing. So for instance, Jujutsu Kaisen would drop here in Australia at 4 a.m., right? Yeah. I would wake up at 3 a.m. to get ready to do the reaction, react to it, edit and upload immediately, and then go back to sleep. So I would do this with all different reactions. So sometimes I'd be up super early. Sometimes I wouldn't go to bed. Sometimes I would stay up until I'm done reacting to something at 2 a.m., edit, upload, go to bed at 4, wake up at 12, right? So like my schedule was all over the place. So at this point, I'm like, I can't do this if I have a kid. Like I need to figure out a different way of doing this. So I started going to some of the other channels, and I would just watch when they would upload stuff. And I'm like, okay, some of these channels are uploading at a particular time. Some are really specific. Some are just, they would launch 4 or 5 episodes of something, 4 or 5 videos within like an hour span, but at a particular time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, maybe if I help guide my audience to come to my channel at a particular time, it will free me from needing to be a slave to the time of the content releasing to me. So I started with that. Then I was like, I need editors. I was talking to some of the reactors, and I was looking at like the Patreon stuff, and I was like, my Patreon is abysmal in comparison to other channels that are the same size as mine. And I was like, why is that the case? And they're like, you're just not watching enough stuff. Like, you can't watch enough stuff. Yeah. And I was like, all right. And they're like, do you have editors? I was like, no. And they were like, what? They're like, hold on. They're like, how many videos do you have? So I've never had an editor. So up to this point, over 2,000 videos on my channel, I've edited by myself. Yeah. So people are like, dude, like, you need editors, dude. Like, if you're trying to scale it and grow like you're going to need to spend the money to grow it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. So it's these things that I was like trying to figure out. And it was because of the baby. Right. It was because of the family that I'm now starting to build. So it was like, it was the necessary push. It wasn't the want. It was the need of, I need to create space. I need to create space here. Because I want to be, if, you know, again, the logic things start popping up, right? I'm like, all right, well, if I do this, I'll create time so I can watch more stuff, but then potentially I can find a part-time job to where if something happens to YouTube, I have editors that can still edit. I have money coming in just in case if something were to happen to the channel. Yeah. So I'm thinking of like all these scenarios now of like necessity versus just like, oh, well, you know what? We could figure it out. It's just me and her. Yeah. Like, no, we have a life now that it's about, or about, you know what I'm saying? So it's a different motivation, a different level of thinking. Right. And I'm like, all right. And it started to trickle into other things. Right. So it's like, again, I'm a car guy. So I had a car that I bought that I enjoy. Right. But I know the payment is ridiculous. Yeah. I'm like, all right, the payment's ridiculous. All right. So she has a car that's fully paid off. It's an SUV. I have a coupe. I don't need this car. So I'm thinking of like all these things of like just trying to be ready because I don't want to be in a uh-oh scenario. Right. Totally. But again, it's the necessity of the baby. It's not like a aspirational, I want to be great. And that it's more for this now. I can't explain the natural focus of need versus desire stuff. Yeah. I can't explain it, but yeah, it's been an interesting journey so far for sure.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I mean, like you said, like the prioritization of need versus want and like how that sort of changes when you have, you know, dependency upon you to worry about. It definitely changes like the sort of creative aspect of like how you approach this space. But for, you know, yourself, when, in terms of, you made a good point earlier about how, you know, you don't see this necessarily as an artistic endeavor, but like a sort of personality space to share yourself with. I always, you know, advocate and like, you know, appreciate when people have those sort of creative outlets on top of reactions, people who do skits, who do like a podcast, other things. And you have your podcast now, Built by Anime, something that you started up recently, which I took a listen to. It's really great. And you mentioned on there how, like the really great clip that you put out about how anime saved your life. Vinland Saga, particularly. How is, you know, again, balancing the work life stuff with, you know, a kid on the way and like trying to structure the channel, having sort of like those, you know, small creative outlets, how does that help you in that sort of process of having something that's like creatively, again, yours, like you said, you're not working for anyone, it's something that you can like control yourself and like do at your own leisure?
Yeah, I think for me, because I still do creative things for fun. like I have dancers Tourette's. I call it dancers Tourette's. You put music on it, I will actually start going. Like it's just a natural thing. You know, me and my partner do some fun stuff together, go to footy games, movies, things like that. Just like kind of the regular couple stuff, family time. But the creative side, in terms of content wise, I think any creator that's been on the platform for a particular time, they get an itch to do something different. And you're just like, I want to do something else. You get tired of doing the same thing over and over. Not that you don't like it, but it doesn't scratch the itch like it used to. Mm-hmm. So obviously with Ismahawk, we have a lot of things on the way, I can't discuss it. I wish I could, but I can't. But we have that, but I'm not there. They're based in Vegas. So I do stuff through video with them and things that we're doing and planning, but it's still not a tangible thing for me. Right. And I was like, I want to create something, but I wanted it to be of value to people. I was like, I needed something that wasn't just an entertainment digest. I wanted it to be something that I felt was added value, not only to them, but with my future kid or kids on the way. I was like, I wanted to leave them something that they can use as a resource of storytelling through, you know, how anime had helped people. Because to be honest, I watch anime, they're probably going to watch anime. So I wanted them to kind of see like some of these philosophies and things that are within these shows that are sometimes super subliminal, but are there to help sometimes. And how, you know, I think a lot of people, when they watch anime, they don't really realize why sometimes they feel so attached to a particular character or a particular story thread. They know that they really like this character, but I think it goes a little bit deeper than what I think sometimes people understand. Yeah. And I wanted to have this type of resource for my kids. Like, you see all these different types of stories of different people's success, and there isn't a particular pathway or here's the secret to success that everybody nowadays wants to sell you on. Yeah. There's no cookie cutter way to do it. But I also know that a lot of these people that I'm having on the podcast are anime fans from different walks of life: musicians, actors, producers, entertainers, athletes. But they all particular, for whatever reason, have this commonality of being anime fans. And I'm like, why? What about these characters or this character or this story or this message resonated with you? And did this help you in whatever you're trying to do? And 9 times out of 10, it's affected them in how they move. And it's so wild to me. So that was the reasoning for it. And it kind of started because of that Vinland Saga episode. That really was the catalyst for me of thinking about, I think there's something here. Because it affected me in a way that I wasn't expecting, and it saved my life in a way that I wasn't expecting. So it was like a twofer for me, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a, you know, sort of, like you said, a important factor of like how we, you know, it develops into our, you know, success. As you say, there's no clean way to get to success. But the creators that we do know who have made it have like sort of like a, you know, common threads that we see. And like I think anime as a focus is like a really interesting one to touch upon, even though, like you said, you know, over the last decade, we've made such leaps in terms of like the conversation around it being so accepted, but like it's still sort of in its infancy in terms of like the culture, like how it's impacted us as a generation. Yeah. So there's like so much to explore there. Yeah, I want to sort of like get into like in that sense, like our, you know, final stage of, you know, your time with the channel, which my first question is, how have you, do you feel you've grown with the channel over the years personally?
I think early on it was being aware of myself. I think sometimes you get on camera and you try to put something on. You're like, all right, you almost feel awkward. It's like somebody that wants to model and they say, I need you to walk and I'm going to teach you how to walk. And now all of a sudden you don't even know how to walk properly. You're trying to think about how to walk. Right. And early on, if anybody, all my videos, by the way, are on my channel. I've not taken any video off for a reason. I want people to see where I started. while some of the early videos, like the first 2 videos I did, have become successful over time, they weren't successful out the gate, but you could see how awkward I was on camera. Like very like, hi, like I was trying to be a presenter style of person and like thinking about, okay, how do I look? How should I sit? All of this. And I forgot who it was. I don't know if it was Danny. I forgot who it was, but somebody was like, do you feel awkward talking to me right now? And I was like, no. And they're like, that's the camera. I'm the camera. And it was one of those things of just being okay of like, you don't need to second guess yourself about how you think you're going to be appearing to someone on the other side of the screen. Because you really, some do it, but most of the time you're not really thinking about that when you're talking to your friends. Mm-hmm. You're not thinking like, okay, am I standing weird or do I sound funny? Should I say it like this? Should I add the inflection here? Like you're just kind of being yourself. And I think the authenticity of that is what I feel YouTube was when people started watching it, when it first dropped. And obviously it evolved into where companies start creating channels and corporations are adding stuff and late night TV show hosts and sports analysts now have YouTube channel. Like, cool, I get it. But I think the reason why people tended to, love YouTubers was because they felt like normal people. They felt it wasn't too produced. So I think for myself, it was just being okay with the facets of myself. Yeah. The tech stuff, the car stuff, the anime stuff, and being okay with that. And then you get better with stuff, right? Like repetition. So having that access to editing over and over and over, you get really good at edits. Like, all right, well, I'm pretty good at cutting. All right. Yeah. Then you start figuring other stuff out. But I think it's that. And then also the other side of things is like managing time. Because when you get to the point where you have all day to do something, it will take you all day to do something. And and I thought, 40 hours extra a week, I'm going to get all types of stuff done. You don't. you actually don't. Right. You don't. It's weird. When you start working for yourself, you actually work. I feel like sometimes you work less hard than you would for someone else. I think as humans, we like to help people. Yeah. So it's like, it almost feels like too self-indulgent. Yeah. If you're like, I got to work hard for it. I think it's almost counterproductive sometimes. So it's trying to trick yourself into getting out of that mode. And it may be instantaneous for some. It took me a little longer to really get into now. Mm-hmm. All right, we got to get this done now. Like half the day is gone. You haven't even done anything yet. Like, what are you doing? So that's been, I think, the mirror of like being self-aware enough to say, okay, I could be doing better at this. And that's been, I think, the pill to swallow is like the results are the results and you can't really blame anybody. You know what I'm saying? It's like, well, it's just you. So who else is it going to be, So I think that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a quote by like my girlfriend likes to tell me a lot, which I'm going to paraphrase and probably misquote a little bit, but it's something like, it's hard to keep up the pace when you're the one leading the charge. It's basically that, when you're the one that's sort of in charge and like pushing things forward, like it's hard to keep up your own hype sometimes. If you're, if there's like, you're the one that's like that's pushing yourself to keep going forward, it's like you have to have the ability to, like you said, be aware that everything lies on you. If you waste the day, you wasted the day. No one else is to blame for that.
Eric, I literally talk to myself and I'll go to the bathroom and I'll go look at myself in the mirror and I'll look at I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Yeah. Like, what are you doing right now? Like, what are you doing? Like, I literally do that. Like, you said you're going to get this done. Why isn't it done? Right. What's going on? Yeah. And I have to have these conversations. It sounds like I'm crazy, but I have to do that to myself because every person in sports, music, whatever, I've had people around me that have always been extremely honest and call me out on my shit when I'm not doing what I should be doing. So I have to become that for myself at times of like, dude, you got to step this up. Like this isn't enough.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. Accountability is a big obstacle to overcome. And in that sense, I guess if there's any other answer to this, my next question would be, what has been the biggest obstacle for you over your years with the channel? If not those two examples.
The biggest obstacle with the channel, not blaming the algorithm for everything is probably the biggest thing. It's early on when my channel took the hit, when it died, essentially, it still never fully recovered from that. Like it's still probably maybe like 70% to what it used to be. Right. However, I was like, all right, am I producing enough? Am I producing the right amount of stuff? Am I producing the right type of content? Am I producing things that people want to watch? Like, has the zeitgeist moved and I'm still here and things have went another direction and I'm still romanticizing about what was popular. So you get into this blame game of trying to figure out everything else when it's like, all right, well, sometimes it's an internal thing. Sometimes it's a genre thing in terms of like, all right, has the market left? Where'd the market go? The attention's different. The attention's gone. So it's trying to understand those things and one, not beat yourself up about it, but two, not putting like this false sense of blame on things that may not actually be the reasoning for it. Right. But sometimes you don't want to take the accountability and it's like, it's like, well, you disappeared for 2 months in a time where everybody was at home. So the odds of other people creating still and new people finding these people or people that were watching you finding someone else, when you come back, and if it's not on a hitter of a video where you get a lot of your initial notification followers watching said video, YouTube may not want to push it to anybody else anyway. So like, well, your viewers only want to watch this. Why am I going to share this with anybody else to watch?
Right.
The logic wasn't there for me at the time. I was just like, what happened? Like, so you can't take breaks? Like, yeah. No, I just didn't understand how it worked. I didn't understand how it worked. The other big thing I would say is copyright. Copyright is like the biggest issue for content creators in the reaction space, full stop. Yeah. That is the absolute biggest one. And to be honest, I don't really understand why it's that drastic. Movie trailers, bare minimum should be shared revenue. Bare minimum. Yeah. There should be no reason why that's even a block, a takedown notice. That shouldn't even happen. The reaction space to shows and things like that, to me, I've never seen anyone comment on my video saying, I'm watching this for the first time with you. Yeah. Usually they're coming to a video to watch a reaction to validate how they felt about the show. They just want to see how you felt. It's like if you went up to your friend, like, yo, you got to check out this funny video. Watch. And you show them the video. You're watching them. That's a reaction video. That's all it is. Yeah. That's literally what a reaction video is. They've already seen it. They're showing you. They want to see if you like it. That's all that it is. So the idea that for whatever reason, it's deemed as, it's taking revenue away from a particular property. It's like they've already seen it. Yeah.
That's very true.
You're building community around your property. That's what you're doing. It's not competitive to your bottom line. They're not rewatching it by themselves. They want to see how other people feel about it. That's the point of it's just weird that they don't grasp this concept. Yeah. So for me, it's one of those things of time happens, things evolve, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there will be a time where reaction videos will become content to other people, to the copyright holders. They may be a time where it becomes, okay, this is a type of content. Right. They just haven't acknowledged the fact that it is. Unfortunately, you need the other content for it to be content.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not taking away from your bottom line. So I think in that regard, it's just really interesting to me. And I think that's the struggle I think that content creators in the reaction space have, is this copyright claim with that, or if a piece of music is in the video, the entire video gets claimed. Yeah. And you're like, what? Like, how does that work? Dancers had it big, have an issue with it as well. Me being a former professional dancer, a lot of my friends are choreographers or performers. They'll put a video out to music. That's what you dance to. Yeah. And it gets claimed. Yeah. You know, takedown notice, copyright claimed, strikes. And you're like, I get it that a part of this video has music that you don't own, but the art of dance is what's being showcased here.
Yeah.
And you just block it completely. So yeah, the copyright, I think, is the biggest issue. I think that's plaguing reactors in my field specifically, but I think that's probably the biggest issue, I think, on any of the platforms is copyright.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's very well said, very well put about like the whole spectrum of that. And the final question is, beyond any financial or monetary value, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of the channel for you?
Community. Mm-hmm. I think community is my favorite part about it. And I didn't know that that was going to be a thing, because it's a weird parasocial relationship. But you see certain people often, you know, especially if you do live streams or you have a Discord server, you can almost build some kind of relationship with people in a way that you didn't think. And people that come to your channel help validate a little bit about who you are. I think it's an interesting feeling of, hey, people are following me because they like me, right? I'm not, again, if you're putting who you are out there, that is, I think, the feeling that I have. If you're putting a persona out there, I don't know if it will feel the same.
Right.
But for me, I put me there. So when I see people that like what I do, I'm like, man, that's cool. Like, they actually, they like me. It's not just me acting like a particular person, or I'm going to go extreme and hopefully I get crazy clicks, and because that's not who I am. You know what I mean? So it's, I think it's probably been the most rewarding, is like just building the community and having people there that are into the same stuff that I'm into. And if everything continues, being able to be a father that can be here with my kid and not have to leave for 8 hours a day, and I can be here.
Yeah. That
is like, if everything goes that way, that would be fantastic.
That'd be ideal. Yeah. That'd be the dream. Thank you, man. I want to get into our final questionnaire of the show, what we do for everyone here. There's 10 questions down the line for you. The first one is, what is your favorite TV show of all time?
Ooh, favorite TV show of all time.
Yeah.
Because it's just top of mind, probably Game of Thrones.
Makes sense. Yeah. It's a good pick. What's your favorite film of all time?
Inception.
Oh, it's quick on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great one. Question 3, what stresses you out?
What stresses me out? Stupidity.
I can see that. That makes sense. That's a good one. What helps you relax?
Helps me relax. I think my partner. I think she helps me relax. I think just having the right teammate is like it's everything for sure.
True.
Yeah.
Very true. Yeah. What is a hobby or passion you have outside of TV and film?
Cars.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned it. Yeah.
Car. Oh my God. Cars for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What fictional character do you relate to or just care deeply about?
Fictional character that I care deeply about. Goku is top of the list for sure.
Right there, right behind you.
Top of the list. Right there. Exactly. Probably just because of when I saw him for the first time as a young teenager and just seeing like this persistent push to be better in every every obstacle, he just beat it or tried to find a way or just wouldn't give up on it. That was the first time I've ever seen anything like that in media. Right. And it just stuck with me. So now there's so many of those that are out there, so many stories that kind of showcase that. But that was the first thing that I saw like that. And I was like, that's what I want to try to aspire to. So
right. Makes sense. What is your guilty pleasure show or film?
Oh, guilty pleasure show or film. The first Fast and Furious movie. That's my guilty pleasure. Yeah,
because the cars.
It's not a great movie. The lines are extremely cringe, but guilty pleasure for sure.
Yeah, I'm with that. I really still love that franchise. So I actually rewatched that first film like a month ago. It's a
same
time. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. What show or film gave you your favorite reaction experience with the channel?
Naruto. Naruto for sure. Yeah. That was my favorite, I think. If we're talking about viewership, Naruto. If we're talking about just pleasure of like watching, probably Haikyuu.
Haikyuu, yeah.
Haikyuu, yeah. I think, yeah.
Yeah, Haikyuu has definitely some great hype moments, for sure.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. What show or film do you wish you could erase from your memory and react to, again, for the first time on camera?
Oh my God. That I can erase from my memory and watch again on camera.
Yeah.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is this still like me knowing everything that I know right now, just minus this show?
Yeah, I would say so. It's not that, it erased your experience with it and everything. It'd be as if like we sat down there, like right now, boom, it's gone from memory. Turn on the camera, you react to it, and it just you experience that again for the first time.
Okay. Probably Game of Thrones. The only reason I didn't say Dragon Ball is because if I've seen so many anime, DragonAll wouldn't sit the same for me now as it did when I was a kid.
Right, yeah.
So yeah. So Game of Thrones for sure.
Yeah. Game of Thrones is a great one. And the final question here: what advice would you give to your past self if you can go back in time when you first started the channel?
When I first started the channel. Know the industry. Like pay attention to YouTube as a platform. Understand it. And then know who are your contemporaries. Know who your quote unquote competition is in terms of attention. That way you don't put blame on things that you don't need to be putting blame on. Like it's a game. Like it's really all it is. Like it's not life or death. It's not going to make or break who you are, but you need to know the rules of the game. You need to know who you're playing against. So while I'm winging it, others may be very focused, and the results are the results. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I think that's what it is, because I'm a very results person. Like these are the results. Why? So I think the why is just know if you're going to do it, know what you're doing. Like know YouTube, know it.
Makes sense. Adonis, thank you so much for joining us today, man. I really appreciate all the insight you gave us. It was really fantastic. Where can we find you online, social media, anything?
YouTube, Super Saiyan Jutsu, or SSJutsu for short. Built by Anime on YouTube as well. Those are kind of only two places that I really want to focus, I guess. Yeah. You can find everything else on those two platforms as far as Instagram and all that stuff. Yeah. I was never good at keeping the same handle for everything, so I'm not that type. But those two is probably where you find everything else. But yeah.
Yeah. If you find us on YouTube, please like and subscribe, all that good stuff. If you find us on the Passionfruit newsletter, please share that. We appreciate any views there as well. And we'll catch you on the next episode.